first step in a dream takes you further than 1,000 in this world. These nightmares can be ended. They can be conquered. Always stay clear in thought, even amidst intoxicating triumph.
Before the goddess of justice, you are worthy. Receive our blessings, embrace our gifts, and rise ascendant. For this is the ending that we all deserve.
Now, let us see if you truly understand what it means to be Nightmare. Bow your head to a one true God. You and I are about to create the most beautiful of nightmares together. Let me show you what a real God can do.
Choose wisely. Trust completely. May you find the ending that you deserve.
Yo, what's up everybody, it's Victon here with another in-game build guide, and for this one we're going to be going over the OG Carrion Golem Elementalist. And before we even get into the guide, I'm just going to say it. I think Carrion Golem Elementalist, with the setup that I have, is better than the Necro Lowlife or a stacking Carrion Golem version. When I started building this character, I did not expect myself to be saying that, but simply put, the build cost is a lot less than the Necro version for the same amount of damage, and I honestly think it feels even tankier. Sure, if you want to spend hundreds of exalts on the lowlife or a stacker, feel free, you are going to get a little bit more DPS. But the tankiness will still be the same or even slightly worse than this Elementalist version. And I personally don't need that extra DPS. I'd rather spend way less currency, be tankier, and do slightly less DPS, all while still crushing all the in-game content from maps to bosses. As you can see in the footage in the showcase, I was able to clear a 119% 8 mod corrupted The Feared fight, which in my opinion is currently the hardest content in the game. That's basically as good as it gets for bosses. But before I get too far ahead of myself, as always, before we get going, if you end up enjoying this guide, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. Also, if you're interested in supporting the channel, check below for a link to my Patreon, where something is going to get you access to some juicy benefits like access to my sub-only Discord, where we have an awesome community of others just like you, ready and happy to talk about builds all day long. I'm also in there 24/7 doing build reviews for people too. Other than that, feel free to stop on my Twitch channel, which is going to be linked below as well. Back to the build guide though, and the strengths and weaknesses of this build are as follows. Overall, between survivability and DPS, I think this is actually the best all-around build that I've played this league, even better than the absurd damage Spectre build that I had. That had mad DPS but less survivability than this, so overall I'm going to give this build an S+ rank here, as I think it's currently a top tier build. For farming maps, I'd give it a solid S rank. Since we opt for haste instead of flesh and stone, it's actually a pretty fast mapper, and it's amazing build to AFK rituals in. For boss killing, this is an easy S++ rank. Any build that can clear an 8 mod 119% corrupted The Feared fight is the cream of the crop for boss killers right now, and this build definitely has you covered with that. It's incredibly easy for even newer players, since the playstyle is very chill. You can just run in circles while your dudes do damage, and you can dodge boss abilities. And since you have such high crazy damage mitigation, it's also pretty forgiving when you accidentally do make a mistake and take some unwanted damage. And on top of that, we have a lot of life regen, so you regen it up very, very quickly. For survivability, I would give this an S++ rank as well. I just cannot stress enough how tanky this build is. Now that we have harvest crafting back in the game, we're back to the glory days of being mega tanks as an elementalist with multiple layers of juicy survivability. I've tested and I can tank Shaper Slams, Phoenix Fire Explosions, Minotaur Slams. All those normal super scary one-shot abilities are no longer one-shot abilities, and like I said, with so much life regen, if you do take some damage, you're going to go straight back up to full in under 2 seconds. For damage, this is going to be an S rank. We do have about 20 million DPS, which is more than enough damage to clear any fight incredibly easy, since we're also super tanky, but it's never going to be anywhere near the damage of, say, a Cluster Jewel Spectre build. But again, in my opinion, that's not even necessary when we can kill all those bosses anyway. As far as build cost goes, I'm going to estimate that I've put about 100x into this character so far to near min-max it. From there, if somebody really wants to absolutely min-max it, I'd say you're looking at about 150 to 170x to squeeze about 5 to 6 million more DPS out of the build, which for an ultimate min-max build is actually pretty cheap compared to some of the other ones out there. Great thing about this build though is you can even play this build solo self-found, so even as a league starter, and then crush all the content all the way up to red maps, start getting some currency, and once you have about 20x into your gear to get the base items for that extra bit of survivability, you're going to be able to clear all the in-game bosses and can start min-maxing your gear. Yeah guys, that was a general rundown of the build. Now what we're going to do is hop into Path of Building. We're going to go over the skill tree, and then we're going to talk about the skill gems, and lastly the gear. So without further ado, let's hop into Path of Building. Alright, here we are in Path of Building. So let's go ahead and go over the tree. So as you guys know, this is probably like my 6,000th Golem build. So I'm not going to go over everything in too great of detail because I guarantee a lot of you guys probably already know this. If you don't and you want kind of more of an entry level build, definitely check out my channel. I do have some like league starters, so definitely check that out if you're interested. But this is going to be more of an in-game guide. So I will, by the way, give you guys some tips as far as like how to start the build out and some of the budget build items. So do know that that is coming. But as far as the general kind of guide here, we're going to go a little bit fast so we can kind of cover this all and make sure it's not like a 2-hour video. So yeah, basically, we're getting tons of life, we're getting tons of minion damage, as you can see, life. We do have unwavering stance over here, so we cannot be stunned. Some minion damage over here, some minion damage here. Definitely make sure you pick up Golem Commander for that +1 to maximum summon golems, and then +1 to specters over here. We want to make sure we get that. It is incredibly important that you make sure you get these reduced mana reservation nodes here. If you don't, then you will not be able to use all of your auras. Make sure you pick those up. We'll talk about this last, so let's go over the large cluster jewels. We actually have pretty straightforward cluster jewels here. We do have Renewal, Rotten Claws, Vicious Bite. And do note that that Vicious Bite can actually be augmented with physical. So, I'm sorry, augment with critical. So, augment critical will 100% chance give you a Vicious Bite. So, actually not too bad there. And you can get either, Chaos Resist, you can get a Elemental Resist on here. I think a best in slot extra suffix there would be Minion Steal increased attack speed. Have increased attack speed, so 3% would be the maximum roll there. But that's only going to give you, what, 6% per large cluster jewel. So 12% total. So again, if you're min-maxing, you can go for that, but if you're not, I wouldn't worry about it. Now, it is interesting here that I only go with a 4 passive for my median cluster jewels, right? And all we're getting is renewal. We're actually not picking up these dread marches. We're only getting renewal. And the reason we're doing that is because 1, we need the skill points elsewhere, and 2, our dudes actually just never die. Super good. So we don't have any issues with our Carrion golems dying or any of our other golems. Our Animate Guardian, he doesn't need the defenses. Your zombies are going to die anyway, but don't worry about that. We do have a solution for that, which we'll go over later. So you don't need the dread marches. So I actually only spend the 3 points and get those. Moving on to our cluster jewel up here, and we actually have, like I said, we have 4 of those. I do have one up here where I do actually get the dread march, and that's because I just had 1 point left over in the build when I hit level 100, and that is where that point went. Dread march, you don't need that. I would say that's literally your level 100 point because it's just not necessary. What is necessary though is this small cluster jewel. This is incredibly important, and this does go with our Glorious Vanity down here, which we will talk about right now. So Glorious Vanity, this used to be incredibly used, like everybody was using it back in Harvest League, and let me tell you, it is back for sure. People stopped doing it in Heist League because it was a lot harder to get chaos resistance on gear. Now that we have Harvest back in the game, we can get chaos resist on our gear much easier. So with that, Glorious Vanity in the name of Zabaqua, make sure you get that one, in the name of Zabaqua. And the reason we're doing this jewel specifically is because we're getting this node right here, Divine Flesh. Now, Divine Flesh is incredibly OP. They actually nerfed it, and it's still crazy strong. So what does Divine Flesh do? So it gives you +5 to maximum chaos resistance, and it also, more importantly, 50% of elemental damage taken as chaos damage. So how we're going to abuse this? Basically, we're going to get as much chaos resistance as possible. You can see I actually have 88% max chaos resist, which is crazy high. So any damage that I take that is elemental damage, 50% of it will actually go through my super high chaos resistance. So with that, I am not only getting a really good chaos resistance, I'm basically also getting really good elemental resistance as well. So we're going to do that in a couple ways. You start out at 75% with your base chaos resistance. Divine Flesh gives you +5, so we're now at 80%. So how are we going to get the rest? Well, one is for this small cluster jewel right here. We're going to go with Born of Chaos for +3 to maximum chaos resistance. Now, I actually self-crafted this myself. I probably crafted it for, I don't know, 100 to 200 chaos, somewhere in that. Very, very cheap, honestly. And what I was doing here is I went with two things. I obviously needed the Born of Chaos for that +3 to maximum chaos resistance. I also went with the 35% increased effect, which you guys do not have to do if you do not want to do it. That made me, I think I spent 70 chaos on the base because you need an eye level 84 cluster jewel in order to get that 35%. If you don't want to do that, don't worry at all. You don't have to do that. You can get a smaller one, and you can go maybe like 25% increased effect and be just fine. And that's probably only a couple chaos for the base of that. The most important thing is that Born of Chaos. You absolutely want that. And I also went with a little bit of fire resistance, and then I augmented chaos resistance with harvest crafting. And with that, with a 35% increased effect, I'm actually getting about 22% increased chaos resistance for each of these small clusters. So super, super good. And then on top of that, again, the Born of Chaos. So that brings us up to what? 83% chaos resistance. We'll get the rest on our gear, which we'll go over here in a little bit. Now, as far as the jewels that we're using outside of the Glorious Vanity, we are of course using all of the primordial jewels. So we're using Primordial Imminence, Primordial Harmony, and Primordial Might, and then the Anima Stone. Everybody knows what those are, so I won't go into too much detail, but basically you need all 4 of those, and most importantly, the Anima Stone. Once you have at least those 4 plus the Anima Stone, you will get +2 to maximum golems, which is a whole bunch of golems. So get that, and they're actually pretty cheap this league, so they're not even that expensive. Back in Heist League, they were incredibly expensive. They are not even that expensive anymore, which allowed me to actually get this, which I will mention real quick. I do have 2 jewels which have reduced mana reserved on them. I paid about 4, I paid 4 exalts, and the other one I paid 5 exalts. And the reason I'm doing this is because I have Pride and Haste, as well as Generosity. It's Generosity and Dread Banner. So if you have those, then you do need 2% reduced mana reservation on your jewels. And the reason I'm going with, let's say, the Haste instead of Flesh and Stone for that 15% more physical damage is I like to be a faster map clear, so having that Haste on myself as well as my golems is going to help me clear the maps a lot faster, and just makes it for a lot better experience. It's a huge quality of life having that extra move speed, so very, very good on that. If you did not have these jewels, right, if you want to do a budget option and you didn't have the money for the reduced reservation on those, you could always anoint your amulet with Charisma, or you could anoint your amulet with Champion of the Cause, which is somewhere down here. I don't know where it is. Let's type it in. Champion. There we go. So those are the 2 kind of ones that you could get. That's 4% reduced, which is more than enough. And then the Charisma is 8%, so way more than enough, and you would be just fine if you wanted to do that. As far as anointments, if you don't need to do that, let's say you do have those reduced mana reservation jewels, you have 2 of them, and you are okay with mana, what I would do for my anoint is 2 things. You could do 2 different options here. You could do a Ravenous Horde for damage for your minions, or if you wanted to go with a defensive option, which I kind of prefer myself, I could go with Soul of Steel for +1 to maximum all res and a whole bunch of armor, a ton of armor. Which I guess kind of leads me into the next topic of not only do we have a ton of chaos resist, which helps us with chaos damage, as well as that elemental damage, we also have 90% physical damage reduction, and that's flat. That is without my my flask activated. That's just a flat 90% physical damage reduction. So that's why this build is just so tanky. We have so many layers of defense that it's super good. So we have that 90% physical damage reduction, and how we're actually getting that is one thing that I do want to mention real quick before we move on. Here's a tip for you guys. For the Glorious Vanity, when you're purchasing these in the name of Zabaqua, right, so that we can get that divine flesh, purchase one and then check the nodes that it has on it. Each one will have different nodes. All of these small nodes will be different. Those aren't too important. The most important one is this node right here. Every Zabaqua jewel that you will get is going to have a different node for this node right here. The best in slot one that you can get is this, the automation studies, and that's going to get you +4 up to +4 physical damage reduction and a whole bunch of armor, and that's flat, which is the best type of physical damage reduction. So let's actually see how much this gives us. It's not going to be a ton, but it actually is going to put us above that cap of 90%. So we're at 88%, and it gives us +4, so that's going to put us over cap. So that's perfect. That gets us to that 90%. So if you didn't have that, you would be at 88. Now we're at 90. So perfect, and a whole bunch of extra armor. We go from 11.8 to 14.5, so a whole bunch of extra armor too. So yeah, so do that. So buy one. I think they're like 14 or 15 chaos right now. They're not even that expensive. Buy one, check to see what the node is right here. If you didn't hit that, sell it, resell it, and buy another one. A couple other good ones are, you can get one that has +1 to maximum chaos res. That's pretty good. I would keep that, but keep going until you get this physical damage reduction. There's also one that gives minion damage and minion life, also decent, but again, I would want to go with this, so maybe use that until you get this one. So yeah, so that's a tip right there. I would definitely make sure I get that 4% increased physical damage reduction. It's very good. Now, we'll kind of go over into the items here, and I'll just show you. We are not necessarily stacking either or for the primordials. We have 3 primordial harmonies and 2 primordial eminences. I did want to mention that because you do need at least 2 primordial eminences to hit that 90% cap. If you have only 1 primordial eminence, you will not hit that cap. You'll have 89. So just note that. And then the harmonies are just really good damage. So we do go with those harmonies. I actually think we have 4. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. So we have 4 harmonies and we have 2 eminences. Perfect. Cool. So that is our tree. Let's go ahead and move on over to our ascendancy. Perfect. So as you're leveling up, the first one that you're always going to be picking up is a Liege of the Primordial. That's going to give us a couple different things. Buff effect for our golems, which is going to affect our Chaos Golem, which is giving us that physical damage reduction, which is super good. It's a very strong point of this entire build. And it's also going to give us our Stone Golem effect, which is going to be life regen, so also very good. We have about 1200 life regen per second in this build, which is pretty strong. So anytime you actually do take damage, which is very rare in the first place, you're going to be regening that up to the maximum very quickly because you have so much regen. So that also, one of the good things here is this is a new thing. Not only are we getting that also the +1 to maximum summon golems, we're also getting this new thing here that you can see in red there. Summon golems are resummoned 4 seconds after being killed. Super huge quality of life in my opinion. So when you're doing really hard maps in the end game, especially like 100% delirium, even though our golems almost never die, but in the rare case that you do have a golem die because it just took some insane damage, it's going to be summoned again after 4 seconds. Whereas let's say if you're a necromancer, you're gonna have to go back to town to your hideout, you're gonna have to turn off all your auras, you're gonna resummon your golem, you're gonna go back in, and then you're gonna start over and you've lost the portal. Right now you don't have to do that because it's going to be summoned again after being killed. Super huge quality of life. So your second point is going to be Elementalist, and that's going to give you a whole bunch of different stuff. Also, additional buff effect, but it's also going to give you +1 to maximum summon golems, and it's going to give you 100% increased ailment immunity. So freeze, ignite, shock, we're going to have all immunity to all of those ailments. So we will not have to use, for example, a freeze removal flask on our flasks because we have it right here for free. So super nice. And if we have that last point there, and as well as the Anima Stone and all of our primordial jewels, that's going to give us a total of 6 golems. So for 6 golems, what's our setup going to be? It's going to be 4 Carrion golems, it's going to be 1 Chaos golem, and 1 Stone golem. So that is going to be your setup for all of your golems. So now this node right here is actually a new one, and I absolutely love this. It's insane. Bastion of Elements triggers level 20 primal Aegis when allocated. So basically how this works, for every allocated notable you have on your tree, you're going to get 100 to a shield. We actually have 30 on our tree, so we're actually going to get a 3000 elemental shield that refreshes every 5 seconds. Super crazy. So I'll just give you kind of an example of why that's so crazy, right? We have insane chaos resistance, right? And then our elemental resistance plays off of that chaos resist. So we actually have pretty good elemental resistances as well. So we already are taking very little elemental damage. And on top of that, when we do take elemental damage, we now have a 3000 elemental shield that'll get onto again. That's a second defensive layer for elemental damage. Super good. This is what allows you to tank the Shaper Slams, the Phoenix Fire Explosion, all of those crazy big elemental hits. You can now tank it and it's not going to one-shot you ever. Super nice. Cool. Now the last point here is not crazy important, but it is pretty good. So Shaper of Storms, your hits always shock. All damage of hits can shock. Now that's important because any type of damage, it doesn't matter if it's cold, fire, lightning, it will all shock. And no matter what, you will always deal 15% more. It'll take a buff that has 15% more damage taken on that monster. And it's going to last 2 seconds flat. Okay, so that's really good. So now the way that we're going to abuse that is we're going to have Flame Dash. We're going to Flame Dash through the boss, and that fire damage that he takes is going to shock him for 2 seconds, and he's going to take 15% more damage for that 2 seconds. So I only use it on bosses, but it works all the time. It's perfect. Lost my voice, sorry. It's super good. It's a huge damage increase. It's a 15% more multiplier, and it's basically free because you're flame dashing all over the place anyway. So really good, and there's really no other options anyway. So that's just where we're gonna go ahead and pick up. Cool. So that is the tree. I guess I can walk you through over here real quick. We do have basically 4.5 million damage per golem, so right under 20 million DPS, which is more than enough for any boss in this entire game. It's going to be a little bit like, for example, it's not going to be as much damage as like a crazy Spectre build that has the 12 passive cluster jewels and all that good stuff, and they're doing 100 million Shaper DPS. But 20 million is more than enough for any boss in the game, especially with how tanky we are. We can literally just run in circles, and the fight's going to take 10 more seconds, and we will never die, and we beat the fight, right? It's totally fine. That is a totally adequate amount of damage. Cool. So let's go ahead and move on to our skills. So, of course, we have Summon Carrion Golem is our main skill here. Do note that it is the best to get the default. It is the most damage. We want a 21, 23. Don't try and go for Anomalous or Divergent. It is the best. Other than that, the setup is pretty typical as far as what you're always going with Carrion Golems. I do want to mention a couple things here, though. The Awakened Multi-Strike, if you guys don't have that, don't worry about that. You want to at least get an Awakened, you at least want to get a Multi-Strike that is Divergent. That is going to be a little bit more damage than the normal Multi-Strike. The first Awakened gem that you should get for your setup here is Awakened Melee Physical Damage. The reason we're doing that is because it has 10% chance to intimidate enemies for 4 seconds on hit. So that's basically a 10% more multiplier for your damage. So that should be your first Awakened gem that you get for this setup, is Awakened Melee Physical Damage. Very good. So moving on to our buffs, we have Molten Shell, Convocation, and Flame Dash. supported by second wind, and it's actually, we could go with a anomalous second wind. I just made that upgrade. Anomalous second wind is definitely the best. Now molten shell is going to give you a couple things. It's going to give you a bunch of armor, and it's also going to give you a shield, another shield. So we're just stacking so much shield, so super good. I actually put that on my left click so that anytime I'm running around the map, it's automatically getting casted. Anytime I run around, molten shell will always be up. Convocation and flame dash for our other skills. Again, remember, flame dash is going to be what we're using for bosses to get the shock effect on them. So moving on to our minions, support minions here, we do have summon chaos golem, summon stone golem. Do note that those are anomalous. That is the best. 20% increased buff effect, so that's just more physical damage mitigation, and that is more life regen per second, and it's supported by feeding frenzy and maim for damage buffs. Moving on to our weapon. Now, I have a weapon that has the bench craft, trigger socketed spells on skill use, so that's why I have this set up here. I have desecrate, so it's always going to be desecrating, and then this is actually a nice quality of life kind of thing that I've been starting to do, is putting raise zombie on here as well. They're not going to have a lot of life like you typically have, like, you know, meat shield or minion life on your zombies, but I don't do that. The reason I'm doing that is because they're going to die occasionally, which is fine, but they're always going to be summoned. I'm always going to have maximum amount because I'm always summoning them with my wand auto triggering raise zombie. So it's pretty nice quality of life. You'll never have to kind of manually summon a zombie again. Pretty nice there. Now I do have flesh offering, and I do have divergent flesh offering as well, and that again is on your trigger socketed spells wand, divergent being a little bit more damage. We'll go over the wand here in a second when we go over the items, but that is the setup that I have. If you don't have the wand setup, because it is about 15 to 20 exalts for the wand to craft yourself, if you don't have that yet, what I would do is use a cold iron point dagger, which is still fantastic damage, and I honestly would still keep the same gem links here, just so you can prepare it for when you do get the wand. And it doesn't really matter. Again, your zombies are going to die anyway. You just kind of got to deal with it until you get that trigger wand. Not much you can do about it. And then you obviously have to just kind of self-cast desecrate and flesh offering. Moving on to our weapon, this is going to be in our shield. We do have Dread Banner and Awakened Generosity. We do have a Divergent Dread Banner for a little bit extra damage if you are trying to min-max. Now do note here that we on our shield do not have a 3-link. We have a 2-link on our shield. We do not want to link our Vol Haste with our Generosity, because then it would only give that haste to our minions, whereas we do want our haste. So you do not want a 3-link, you want a 2-link there. And the third socket will be its own Vol Haste. And the reason we're going Vol Haste again is because we want that additional movement speed for both ourselves and for our minions. Very, very big quality of life boosts in my opinion. Now we have an unset ring here. Let's see. Let's make sure it's in the right ring. Perfect. We have Pride, Divergent Pride. Again, if you're min-maxing, go with the Divergent version. And we have that in our unset ring. Now we have Assassin's Mark as well in our second ring. Assassin's Mark is so huge for damage. It's definitely the best curse that we can be putting on our guys. If you want to min-max, you're going to go with Anomalous. If you are not, default's totally fine. I'll just show you guys. This is how crazy an Assassin's Mark is. We're at 4.5 million basically, right? Let's take off Assassin's Mark. We lost 1 million DPS. We're at 3.5. So we really only use this on bosses, but you can keep this up on bosses 100% of the time. It's super easy, and that is so much damage. So much damage. Okay, cool. So going on to our helmet. Now we do have a special helmet here that we've crafted ourselves, which we'll go over here in the item section. But for our helmet, we do want to get as much level of socketed minion gems as possible. So 2 or 3 if you can get it, as well as socketed gems supported by level, X minion life. So 16, 18, 20 ideally. And we're doing that because we want our Animate Guardian and our Race Spectre, more so our Animate Guardian, to never die. We want him to be super tanky. In my setup here, my Animate Guardian has about, I think he had 87,000 life, which is super good. We definitely want to go with a level 21 Animate Guardian if you can get it. If you can't get a level 21 Animate Guardian, you can actually get a level 20 Divergent Animate Guardian, and that's roughly the same HP as a level 21 Animate Guardian. Again, min-maxing, if you really want to, you could go a level 21 Divergent Animate Guardian. Those are pretty expensive. That's like 10 exalts for that jewel right there. You don't have to do that. I just have a 21 and it's totally fine. We also have Race Spectre, Blood Magic. It's incredibly important that you have your Race Spectre with Blood Magic, otherwise they're not going to cast their Frenzy and Power Charges. We do have 2 Carnage Chieftains and 1 Host Chieftain as our 3 Spectres. You get those from Act 7, the Ashen Fields. And then we have Meat Shield for a whole bunch of extra tankiness for our Animate Guardian and for our Race Spectre. If you're interested in my Animate Guardian setup that I do have a guide video on how I set up this Animate Guardian specifically. You can check out my channel. I will leave a link in the description for that guide. Definitely check that out. Just note there that for the gloves, we do want to have curse enemies with vulnerability on hit. Instead of, like, I think in the video I have elemental weakness on hit, but that doesn't do anything for us in this. We want vulnerability on hit on the Animate Guardian's gloves. Just note that. Everything else is the exact same. Cool. So that is our helmet. And then of course we do have the Torrent's Reclamation. So I have the Summon Greater Harbinger of Time here. Perfect. So that is all of our skills. Let's go ahead and move on to our items. Overall, this build is not too expensive, to be honest. And I'll kind of walk you guys through the price of these, and also I'll do like mini crafting guides on how I made these items as I go through them as well. This wand here is definitely your best in slot wand. I got lucky. I crafted this for about 15 exalts. I do have a guide to craft this wand specifically on my channel. I will link that in the description below. Check that guide out to craft this wand yourself. It's going to cost you anywhere between 15 to 25 exalts to craft this wand. If you bought this wand straight up, you'd be paying about 35 exalts to anywhere from 35 to 100 exalts. So definitely craft it yourself. Check out that video. And of course, the most important thing here, not most important, the damage is the most important, but one of the really good nice things about it is that trigger socketed spells on use as well. And that automates a whole bunch of stuff about your build. So our shield here, this is what I went with here, and this is an extremely important part of the build as well, because again, we're trying to get as much chaos resistance, max chaos resistance as possible with this build for tankiness. And this is what I went with this build. I combined the +3 to maximum chaos resist. That is a hunter shield. It's a hunter mod on a shield. And then I used an Awakener's Orb with the +3 to maximum chaos and a +2 to all maximum resistance, which is a shaper mod. So I made those together, right? And I did it on an angelic kite shield just for a little bit extra resistance. You could do it on any shield, to be honest, it doesn't matter. So I woke orb those. I got lucky with 16% all elemental resistance. That's not necessarily necessary. You could just harvest craft, augment any resistance, and you're probably just fine. The block chance is not necessary. I just got, I guess, lucky with that. It's really not even that big of a deal. And then I did harvest craft. I had an open prefix, and I did harvest craft augment lucky life, and I got that with my lucky life. I got super lucky on that one. So overall, I think this shield cost me maybe, I think I got lucky again. I got lucky, but it cost me about 6 exalts to make this shield. Not too bad at all, because I hit everything basically on the first try. I think you can probably roughly say that it'll cost you about 10 exalts to make a shield like this, which again is not too bad for a min-maxed shield. For your helmet, I crafted this myself. Now, the way that we do this is we're going to get a bone helmet, which is the base. You want to get a good enchant on it. Flesh Offering and attack speed is the best that you can get, 21%. A couple different ones that you could get. You could get Carrion Golem damage. You could get Carrion Golem buff effect. Assassin's Mark curse effect is actually also really good. You could get, haste, mana reservation reduction, convocation cooldown, a whole bunch of different stuff, but damage wise, Flesh Offering is definitely the best. It needs to be an Elder helmet, and it needs to be an eye level 86 Elder helmet. Make sure you get an 86. Now, I used bound fossils on this, and I crafted it myself. I just did single socket resonators and bound fossils, and I just hit it over and over and over until I had +3 to level of minion gems and +20 to minion life. You can stop if you don't want to continue using currency. You can stop and go, +2 or an 18 minion life, whatever you want to do within your budget, but at least get those 2 stats, socket of minion gems and then minion life. From there, I crafted the chaos resist with augment chaos through harvest crafting. Same thing with the life. I crafted through augment life And then I threw on that dexterity and intelligence because we are actually kind of starved with dexterity and intelligence on this build. You need 159 dexterity for Vol Haste, and you need 240 something for the shield. I'm sorry, for the weapon, which is quite a bit. 242 int for the weapon, which is actually pretty crazy. We're very starved on intellect in this build. So I crafted that on there. And then if you have an open suffix, you can augment physical on this helmet, and you will get 100% chance that nearby enemies take 9% increased physical damage, which is a more multiplier, 9% more physical damage. It's absolutely huge, but make sure that it's only an open suffix. Make sure you don't have an open prefix, only an open suffix. Hit it with that augment physical, bam, you got your sick helmet. And like I said, my Animate Guardian is in this helmet, and he absolutely is incredibly tanky and never dies. Absolutely never dies. Doesn't even come close. I don't think I've ever seen him below like 95% HP. So Brass Dome is going to be our chest piece. Super simple. We've been using this chest piece for like 2 years now for this build. Very good. The reason we're doing it is take no extra damage from critical strikes. Very good defenses. And it has 5,500 armor, which is absolutely crazy. Super good. If you wanted to absolutely min-max this, you could go with a +1 to level of socketed gems, corruption. That adds a bit of damage. Now we're up to 5 mil, so just a little bit over 20 million DPS. It's not that necessary. I clear all the content in the game, even the feared. Like I said, that 8 mod corrupted the feared, and I do it just fine, and I do not have that min-max chest. So moving on to our gloves. We do have, so for the next items, it's actually pretty easy here, pretty cheap. I think you can probably get all of these items for like a min-maxed pair for under 5 exalts if you want to craft it yourself, if you just want to buy it. Each of these are not too expensive. All we're really looking for here is a bunch of life and a little bit of resistances. You want to make sure that you have as much chaos resistance as possible. So between 2 or 3 of these items, you are going to get chaos resistance. And again, you can augment chaos resistance if you need to. But there's also just a whole bunch of items that have chaos resistance out in the market because of harvest crafting. So it's really not too bad to get some pretty nice pairs of gloves, boots, and stuff. So that's what I went with here. And then I also made sure to have a open prefix on these gloves so I could craft that minions have increased damage. Pretty good. Boots. I always get at least 30% movement speed on my boots. This is another place where you're really just getting a whole bunch of resistances, definitely chaos resistance if you can, and a bunch of life. Nothing too crazy there. I think I bought these, actually just bought them straight up for like 2 exalts. Same thing with the gloves. I think I bought the gloves for like 2 exalts. Nothing crazy. Amulet. So I created this myself. I self-crafted this. Now the way that you're going to do this is you're going to have 2 different amulets, and you're going to awaken or absorb them. You're going to have one that has level of all intelligence skill gems, and you're going to have one that has level of all physical skill gems. You're going to awaken or absorb those together, and you make sure that you have a turquoise amulet. Very important to have a turquoise amulet as the final product, because that is 24 dexterity and intelligence. Again, remember how I said dexterity and intelligence were lacking, so you can get a lot of that here on this amulet. I got super lucky and I got a tier 1 all attributes roll, and then I do have catalysts. I think they're called intrinsic catalysts for the attributes. So I have a ton of attributes on this amulet. You guys probably will not have that. So just note that if you don't have like a dex or int on your amulet, like an extra roll, you could get that on your boots. You could get that in your gloves or your rings. Make sure that you get in your attributes somewhere between those if you don't have it on your amulet like I do. I augmented lucky life and I got the tier 1 roll there. Super lucky on that one. I augmented lightning, got the 33%, and I always make sure that I have an open suffix so I can craft that +1 to minimum endurance charge for additional physical damage reduction. So with our rings here, we have 2 unset rings. Very important to have 2 unset rings. For your first one, it's nice if you can get one with like +3 to level of socketed gems, +2 to level of socketed gems, but it's not required. Your pride is going in there, so it is a little bit more damage, but it's nothing too crazy or groundbreaking. With this, you should definitely get life and resistance, so chaos resistance on here, and I had that open suffix, so I crafted minimum endurance charge. Basically what I did here on this one was I bought an unset ring that had +3 to socketed gems and 29 chaos resist, as well as I can't remember what else it had, but it had some other stat that I just removed myself with harvest crafting, and then I augmented life, and then I bench crafted the minimum endurance charge. So that's how I crafted that one. Super cheap. Honestly, this is probably like a 5 Exalt max ring. Nothing crazy. Same thing with this one. I purchased this one myself. It's a dexterity, a life, and then I think I augmented cold. I removed something and then I augmented cold, and then I had that suffix open, so I did minimum endurance charge. Again, honestly, it's a relatively cheap unset ring. And for our belt, we do have a Torrent's Reclamation as the min-maxed version. I can't remember how much exactly they are in price, but I can't imagine they're too crazy. I'm sure they're at least 5, 6, 7, 10 exalts, somewhere in that range. A budget version could be a Darkness Enthroned, which is only a couple chaos, and the jewels that you would get in that Darkness Enthroned would be 20% increased minion damage if you used a minion skill recently, and minion steal increased physical damage. I try and get like a tier 1 physical damage roll or a tier 2, and that is a pretty good damage belt compared to the Torrent's Reclamation. The Torrent's Reclamation is, of course, your in-game belt. It's going to be a little bit more damage, but it's also giving you and your minions movement speed, which is quality of life, which is absolutely huge. That mixed with your haste, you're zooming around the map like a crazy person. So Torrent's Reclamation, definitely best in slot belt there. Cool. And I guess since we're talking about budget, just remember again, right? Let's actually do this. I'm curious. Cold Iron Point Dagger. Until you get this wand, which is, again, you're going to craft it yourself. Hopefully, if you want to buy it, you can. And buying it yourself is going to cost 35 exalts at minimum. Crafting it's going to be anywhere between 15 and 25. Until you make that commitment to do that yourself, you could use a Cold Iron Point Dagger. Let's see how much this affects the damage. Not too bad, not too bad. We still have almost 4 million DPS, and this item is like a 3 chaos item. So that's going to be your best in slot weapon until you craft your big boy wand yourself. Perfect. Cool, just wanted to mention that. So like I said earlier, I did not even include check marking these flasks, so let's go ahead and do that, and I'll mention real quick these flasks. So we do have a Bottled Faith as the min-maxed version. These are actually super cheap right now, because a lot of people are running the Feared, so they're super cheap. I think you could pick one up for about 4 exalts, not too bad. The critical strikes is incredibly important, and also that Consecrated Ground makes them take 10% increased damage. That's a more multiplier, so super good. That's a lot of damage. Let's see, we go from 4.4 up to 4.7, so not too bad. A little bit of damage increase there. Defense wise, the Taste of Hate is a crazy flask. I use this pretty much every build now. Basically what we're doing here, 20% of physical damage. That was some crazy thunder. I don't know if you guys could hear that. Taste of Hate has 20% physical damage from hits taken as cold damage, and also 20% less cold damage taken during Flask effect. So super good defense-wise. We do have a Quicksilver Flask, just to zoom around the map, and I have Curse removal on this as well. We don't need Freeze removal. We don't need any of that. Because you do have that on your ailment immunity. So Curse removal would be, in my opinion, the best one there. Forbidden Taste, this is a fantastic life flask. This is actually a full heal. You can buy one that has, I think it says like restore full life on flask use. Now this usually has the downside of you also take like 4% of your maximum life as chaos damage during the flask effect, which is usually really bad, which is why most people don't use this item. However, we have so much chaos resistance that it's literally, you don't even lose any life whatsoever. It's absolutely totally fine. Not too bad at all. Cool. So that's a full heal. That's an absolute full heal. You could have 1 life use this and you have maximum life instantly. It's like one of the best flasks possible for the builds that have so much chaos resistance. Cool. So Rumi's concoction is also very good for a little bit of block chance. Nothing too crazy. We are getting a little bit less block chance since we have a brass dome, 30% reduced chance to block attacks and spells, but it's still pretty good. It's going to make our block chance go up, from 30% up to 52%. So honestly, not too bad. I definitely picked that up. Plus, it's got some pretty good armor. We go from 14,000 up to about 20,000. So pretty solid. So that's your flask setup there. And we did already talk about all of our primordial gems. We talked about our large and our small cluster jewels. Let's see if there's anything else that we have missed. I guess I could kind of briefly talk about this real quick. So we do have 100% impale chance with this setup, which is pretty solid. Only about 42% critical strike chance on our minions, but it's not too big of a deal. Let's go up here and let's check some random something. Okay, so this is us. So this is crazy. So this is our effective health pool. This is why we're so tanky, guys. We have an incredible effective EHP pool. 165 for physical damage mitigation. So that's our best mitigation is physical. And then lightning, cold, fire, and then chaos. We have a really good mitigation as well. That's just crazy. You guys had to have heard that one. That was crazy. There's like a crazy storm outside right now. Cool. So yeah, I mean, just kind of showing you guys that we just have a super high effective HP pool, which is really, really good for our defenses. Very good. Moving on to our configuration here, we don't have anything crazy checked. I've made sure to check only the stuff that is true, that is reflective of the actual damage. For example, do your minions have power and frenzy charges? I didn't even put maximum, I just put 2 because 2 is pretty... I think that's pretty reasonable for you to get 2 in any boss fight. So I was pretty reasonable on that. Everything else is pretty good here. And just so you guys know, if y'all are ever looking to make sure that you have correct DPS in your builds, use this as a reference if you want to. Use some of my POBs as reference, just so you can have the most accurate information for these. Let's see if that changes the damage at all. It does. So is the enemy maimed? So we forgot to check mark that. So yes, they are maimed. Of course they're maimed. So that actually upped our damage a little bit. Cool. Let's just make sure. Let's go down here. Initial effects. That's another thing. I do not do maximum effect. I always do initial effect. Just being kind of reasonable as well. The slipstream is active. That is our Torrent Reclamation belt. So we can always definitely hit, make sure that's check marked. Is the enemy intimidated? Yes, that comes from our melee fizz. Is shock? Yes, so that's like on bosses when you're flame dashing. These don't do anything. And take those away. Bleeding doesn't do anything. Take that away. And then number of nearby golems, or number of nearby non-minion golems, 10, which is accurate. Cool. So that is very accurate DPS, and that's what our DPS is looking like. So I think a couple of people have asked me to kind of go over my configuration, so just so you guys can kind of see it. And get a look at what I've set up here. Cool. That is everything that I want to talk about on the skill tree. The Pantheons, we'll go over that in the game. Of course, we are killing all of the bandits, by the way, to get the extra skill points, just FYI. We'll go over the Pantheons when we get in the game. Actually, I'm going to show you guys a map in the game. I am going to run a map, and then we're going to do a Guardian. So you guys can kind of see what the map clear speed is like in a real life situation, as well as like some boss damage in a real life situation. And I'll also kind of go over the play style while we're doing this as well. As you guys can see, I have that molten shell on my left click, so that anytime I'm moving around, it gives me a nice shield. There you go. You can see 2,600 physical damage shield. Super, super good. So let's go ahead and go in the map here. We'll take a look at our Pantheons when we get in. See what I picked. I have Soul of Arakali for a little bit reduced damage over time. That is one thing that we are not the best at mitigating in this build, is damage over time. We have very good resistances for like hit damage and physical damage and elemental damage and chaos, but damage over time we do lack a little bit, which most builds do lack a little bit. So that kind of helps there. And same thing here with this one, reduced chaos damage taken. And then same thing with the caustic round there. So those are the two that I went with right there. So let's go ahead and do this map. So one thing that I wanted to mention to you guys is convocation is your friend, guys. I have that on my space bar. So my thumb is actually literally just sitting on space bar 24/7. So my golems are getting teleported to me constantly. And it's super good for defense because it's always going to have just a horde of minions just teleport to me and protect me. So I always like to mention that to people. And I do have my flasks almost always on cooldown. And basically what I'm doing here is I'll kind of like play the piano, right, with my keys. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't hit 5 because that's my flask, my life flask. But I'll do like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll kind of flame dash around. And I just make sure those are always up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Make sure it's always up. Cool. Moving on to the next boss here. As you guys can tell, we also have Vol Haste and Vol Molten Shell. So the Molten Shell I really only use for situations where I know that there's like a really big hit coming, like the Shaper Slam or the Phoenix Fire Explosion, that stuff. because otherwise it's really not even necessary. I mean, as you guys can tell, I haven't even taken damage this run, which is pretty typical. You pretty much really never take any damage just because you have so much mitigation. And I'm actually, by the way, I'm only 96, guys. So in my final build, I'll probably have another 400, I think, life. The rest of my nodes are life nodes. So I actually have more life that I can get, which is pretty crazy to think about. So let's go ahead and hit up the boss here. One thing to also note, which is actually kind of annoying, make sure you guys are resummoning your Summon Greater Harbinger of Time every time that you log back into the game, because it does go away, which is kind of annoying. So I just, I convocated, I threw down my flasks, and I used Assassin's Mark on that boss, instantly dies. Easy peasy. Let's go into the Redeemer's Eye. This is going to be Veritania. This is Awakener level 8. Welcome. I'm just gonna stand still. Actually, I moved. So that was actually kind of good, right? So you could see, it took all of my Primal Aegis, right? My shield. I literally stood in that entire barrage of stuff. That would have killed most anybody. It took the 3000 Primal Aegis shield, and all of my mitigation. And I think I had Molten Shell up at the same time, but that didn't, I don't think he does physical damage. So that was a perfect example, right? Super, super tanky. I literally ate his entire barrage. And then on top of that, I was able to use the Forbidden Taste for an instant full heal. Very good combo. In a real situation, I'd probably be kind of running around, right? Running in circles. That's the best way to play this character, right? Is to literally just run in circles like this around bosses while your golems sit in the middle and do damage. But I kind of wanted to show you guys the tankiness there. So cool. That is really the build, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing kind of what a Carrion Golem Elementalist looks like in the current league. Back in Harvest League, this was the king. This build was all over the place. And it was super, super good. Then Heist came along. We lost Harvest Crafting, so the Chaos Resistance made pretty much nobody play it. Everybody switched over to the Necromancer version, and I think in this league, a lot more people are playing that Necromancer version just because they're used to it from last league, and it is still pretty strong. But this one is absolutely shining right now, in my opinion, because of Harvest Crafting and the fact that we can do Chaos Resistance on our gear a lot easier. I have been having an absolute blast with this character. I'm doing the in-game the super in-game content, 100% Delirium maps, juiced, tier 17 burial chambers. I'm doing the feared, 120% quantity of the feared. And it's all going super, super smooth. And I've been having a blast with this character. So if you guys do enjoy this character, let me know in the comments that you guys are playing it and enjoying it. I hope this build helps you guys out as well. Definitely hit that like button, follow the channel, hit that subscribe button as well if you have not already and you're interested in seeing some more content. That's all I got for this one, guys. I will catch y'all in the next one, and if y'all stayed this whole time through this long video, you guys rock. I appreciate you, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks, guys.